Hello, everybody, and welcome to... You know what? We don't even really have a name for this yet, do we, guys?
Something dumb and punny about
something
time travel.
About no. So it's got to be something. It's got to be something funny and witty about story in games, like maybe story time or something. Because this is the first in an ongoing SDG series where we are going to be discussing story and lore in some of our favorite games.
The deep dive, if you will.
The deep dive, right? Yeah, you could say that we're going deep down on this one, and
that means this will never come out.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Not bad, Finn. But anyway, this is John with SDGC, and I've got Finn.
Also from SDGC. Rebecca.
Also from SDGC.
And Brandon. You guys know what I'm getting at. Jeez.
I don't even know what SDGC is.
I'm just introducing the panel.
I just stumbled my way into this conversation.
And what we're going to do today is we are going to discuss the story behind one of our favorite games of all time, Chrono Trigger. We're not going to be discussing any gameplay stuff in these series of videos.
You know that shit already. Who hasn't played Chrono Trigger?
Right, yeah.
Someone on SDGC hasn't played Chrono Trigger.
Zach and Maddie.
Zach and
Maddie have not played Chrono Trigger. And Jeff. Jeff has not played Chrono Trigger either. Whereas Brandon, you just finished Chrono Trigger for what, the 37th time?
I've lost count, but it's maybe somewhere around 7.
It's so much shorter than I remember. It's so much shorter than I remember it being.
It took me 12 hours.
I was watching your play-by-play in the Twitter DM, and you were like, "Okay, I'm starting Chrono Trigger," and then a few hours later, you're like, "I'm at Magus's castle."
I'm at Magus.
Whoa.
Yeah,
like,
holy shit!
I'm at the Ocean Palace.
Or were you playing just baseline?
I was doing like a standard playthrough.
Okay.
Yeah. See, I didn't do any side quests because I've done them before in previous playthroughs. Like I've 100% of the game. So I was just like, I want to finish it, kill Lavos, get whatever ending I get, just so I can have the game fresh in my mind.
So I think one of the things about Chrono Trigger that immediately stuck out to me, like if we're talking about, like let's start at the beginning, and as we go, we'll hit some of those story beats that we all really love.
Okay, so we're going to talk about Arya first.
No, so right off the bat with Chrono Trigger, one of the things that struck me was that, of course, Chrono Trigger released in 1995 for the Super Nintendo. And one of the things,
4 years old. Feel old now, John?
I was 15 years old, and yes, I feel very, very old right now.
I was 10.
Jesus Christ, you guys. But yeah, so Chrono Trigger opens much differently than many Square RPGs at the time.
Sure does.
Final Fantasy IV opens up, Cecil and the Red Wings. Yep. Yeah. Final Fantasy VI opens up, and Terra and her Imperial soldiers, Biggs and Wedge, are marching towards Narsh. But Chrono Trigger opens up with a young lad waking up. Yeah, birds are singing. You can hear Lean's bell ringing, and there's a millennial fair going on.
Which it's funny that you say that it opened up so differently from other RPGs at the time, because now the young hero being woken up by his mother to be told he's late to meet a girl somewhere is like
it's a thing now.
Fucking RPG standard.
Like now you roll your eyes about the slow starts of RPGs, and Chrono Trigger was such a novel concept.
I
love how it really gives you control over how slow or quick you want the opening to be. Because you can run into the fair, run into Marl, and then boom, you're traveling through time within like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Or you got the whole fair to run around and fight Gato and
plus the village too. Like there's
you
some stuff in the village.
You can even cross
house.
You can cross the bridge and go down into the southern continent.
And there's all these little things down there. I mean, I don't remember specifics because it's been a while, but I feel like there's a bunch of dialogue down there that kind of hints at stuff you're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, they're all saying like, "Oh, I'm going to the fair. I'm going to set up a shop. You should come see me." The kids are saying like, "Oh, I can't wait to go play." So everyone's like talking about it.
Yeah, but there's also there's that one family, if I remember right, that's like really messed up, and you have to come back to them like way later in the game and teach their family line like the meaning of generosity or something. Yeah, and you can meet them so early in the game and like implant that seed. And
what I thought was really, really cool about the opening of Chrono Trigger, running around the Millennial Fair, is you find out later that all of the actions that you are taking part in, a lot of what you're doing in the fair that seems innocuous actually has gameplay ramifications, story ramifications later during the trial, during Chrono's trial, and we'll get to that. But that's something else that right off the bat, Chrono Trigger did differently than other games of the time.
And like subtle things too, like the thing with when she's getting the candy and you can't move, like
or you're trying to rush her too much
because you feel like even if you're not trying to rush her and that's not your intention, you feel in games that you don't want to be standing still for too long. There's an impulse to move or be like, oh, should I be talking to her? Should I be doing something else? Exactly. Like it's such I
mean, who honestly, like nobody will talk to Marl before they touch the pendant on a first playthrough.
Okay, I did that. Come on.
Did you really?
Yes, I
did. The pendant is like shining and like it's like flashing.
I did it too, Brandon.
Grab me.
Oh yeah.
I will admit, the only reason I did it is because I thought that picking up the pendant would move the story forward, and I thought what I thought was going to happen is I thought she was going to have like a line of dialogue and be like, "Oh, my head" or something, and then I'd go pick up the pendant.
But what blows
the game is very clearly trying to get you to pick up the pendant.
It is, and what is so mind blowing about that situation later is during the trial they use that. The game actually uses that. The lawyer for the prosecution says, "Well, he only cared about the pendant, not the princess. Look, he went to go check on the pendant first, and then he went to go look at."
Or Melchior asked you to sell her pendant.
Yeah.
And the best thing about that is it's the game subtly telling you that like your decisions actually matter, and this is like in a world before that became such a tagline and buzzword for RPGs, but your decisions actually mattered in that game. Your choices impacted so many little things to come
in a way that was not telegraphed at all. It's not like choose option A, B, or C. It's just like natural things you're doing in the gameplay.
Right, and that follows later too. I mean, there isn't anything quite as explicit as the Millennial Affair and the trial, but later on there are all those side quests, and then there are also so many. Like you find out later, once you get the bucket opened up and stuff, there are so many different things you can do that will affect what ending you get.
I was just going to say, it's kind of setting you up for the idea of like, oh, hey, this game has 16 endings or whatever it is.
Right?
Yeah, and I can't believe that really no other game has come back to that. Like, it was so brilliant and so well executed, and everybody loved it, but we really... I mean, Chrono Cross had a couple different endings, but...
Yeah, but it didn't have... It was like two or three...
Yeah, and that one sucked actually. The way you had to trigger that. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, but one of the things. So moving along with the story, of course, after everything happens at the Millennial Fair, you head to the square, and then Luca is there building her time machine. Shit goes down. The pendant causes the time machine to break. You get sucked in, and when you get spit out on the other side, all of a sudden you're in 600 AD, which is. Bunch of question marks. And that right there, when I made it to the world map, that was the first inclination to me, all the way back in 1995, that this game was different. This game was something.
You can
special.
tell it's the same continent right away, but
absolutely, but shit's different.
Village is but everything from like the music change to the haze.
Yep. That's all foggy and misty. Yeah, and even the music had that. It had a distinctively, medieval,
old-fashioned,
old world feel to it. Exactly, and so this was the first game I've ever played. It. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is actually the first game to fuck around with time travel.
I wouldn't say that. I'm sure there were other games that did things with time travel as a plot point, but
maybe not in such a meaningful way. Because the crux of the entire game is centered around time travel and changing the future.
The NES game Time Lord begs to differ.
Time Lord? Well, we're gonna pretend that doesn't exist.
Okay.
But it was like, I mean, how many maps did it end up having? It had medieval, 6? It had prehistoric, it had the
futuristic,
millennial, futuristic, Zeal,
and five distinct timelines.
Was there a sixth one?
So you had the present day. Well, let's take them off. You had the present day. You had the medieval world, 600 AD. Yep. You had prehistoric times. You had the Kingdom of Zeal.
Mm-hmm.
You had
12,000 BC.
You had the post-apocalypse.
2300 AD.
2300. Yep, that's 2300 AD. And I think that's all of them.
I think that's it. I think the reason I'm thinking there was a sixth is because you could travel to the sixth one, and that was like Lavos.
Yeah, it was 1999, and that's when Lavos
is
supposed to pop out of the ground.
It just takes you to a tunnel where you walk to Lavos.
Exactly, yeah.
So there were five, but that's it. There were 5 basic renditions on the main, the overworld, and there was continuity there, and you didn't really quite understand that until later. But I know, like what I was
over time, they would float together.
Yeah, like what I was talking about earlier, where you could go back into the village and talk to some people. There were like when you go back to medieval times, there are a couple of houses where you talk to them, and yeah, it's obviously not the same people because it's hundreds of years earlier, but you get like that one family that's been there because that's the era in which you're supposed to teach them how to be generous or whatever, and you realize it's the same family. Just years and years before. So there's those clues already, and it's just the continuity is so well done.
Well, like if you want to talk about continuity and ramifications, I think one of the first. I think you were first, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the first time the game actually shows you how the past affects the future is when you go back in time to 600 AD and you kill the Yakra, and you save the queen.
Luca explains it to you.
Luca explains it to you, and so you go back. So after you kill the Yakra, you go back, and all of a sudden in the present time, the Chancellor is extremely hostile to you. Yep. And he imprisons you. You got to fight the dragon tank. You don't know why, and it's not till much later in the game you find out that because of your actions in 600 AD, the Yakra's ancestor, descendant.
When Luca's explaining it to you, where it's like, they what are they like vomiting out their ancestors or whatever?
Yeah, they're just kind of like all kind of coming off of each other.
Yeah, that little scene is great.
And you find out that because of your actions in the past, the Yakra's descendant has kidnapped the Chancellor just like his ancestor did, and is trying to take over the kingdom to get revenge on you, and you fight in that very same courtroom that he was trying to have you tried in. That to me, like I thought that was
like at the very end of the game.
It was so fucking cool.
The side quests were the ones that truly dealt with the time traveling ramifications and the continuity. Yeah. Because of course, I think one of the most famous ones is the one where you leave Robo behind.
So you leave Robo, and
he plants the forest.
He's plowing the field.
He's just sitting there plowing and tilling.
Yeah. The animation is great.
And then you find his rusted remains and you refix him up, and he's like, poof, what's up?
But it's also it's so poignant though, Finn, because I mean they plainly state, like Robo plainly states, he's like, for you it's only been a few moments, but for me 500 years.
Exactly.
Like 400 years? 400 years have passed.
Yeah, I think so.
And it's so crazy. Like you can go back in time after that scene. You can go back in time with Robo, and past Robo is there tilling the fields for the rest of the game. For the rest of the game, he is there tilling the fields. And it is so fucking so here's a question I have for everybody here. So up on my wall, you can barely see it right over my shoulder here, but I have a scene, a shadow box of that scene where Luca is they're all reunited, they're at the campfire, and Luca is fixing Robo, and it's one of my favorite scenes in the whole game. It's probably one of the most iconic scenes in the whole game.
Yeah, it might be the best.
It's one of the few that actually has a key art of it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Precisely.
It's on the cover of the soundtrack that came with the DS version.
So there are so many theories about what happens in this scene, because they talk about an entity, and Robo theorizes that they are reliving something, or they are living out or reliving the thoughts of some entity. Some entity is guiding their hands, and there have been all kinds of theories in the community of fans of Chrono Trigger.
Usually a lot of it points towards Shala.
Yeah, as to what entity they're referring to. There have been theories about it being Shala, about it being some kind of deity, about it being Lavos, about it being Magus himself. And I wanted to see what everybody thought. Like, do any of you have your own idea or theory as to what entity they're referring to? Because the game never explicitly mentions what it is.
I don't think it's Lavos.
No. I think Shala's a possibility. The way I took that scene is that they themselves don't really understand it. It's kind of like a weird metaphor for God or whatever. But also, I feel like the way it was written, it was the writers leaving because they obviously had ideas for sequels, Radical Dreamers and Chrono Cross being some amalgamation of that. I feel like it was them leaving themselves open to have a bigger plot later in a possible sequel that just never got realized. I don't think there was any specific tie to Lavos or Magus. I think Shala is a possibility, especially given what happens in Chrono Cross. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it was anything specific. I think it was just an opening for the future.
Brandon, what about you? You mentioned Shala as well.
Yeah. I mean, so much about Shala is left open, and she's sort of like the catalyst for all of Chrono Cross. Like, I feel like they should have maybe explained a little. Like, if there's anything they could have done to improve it, would be maybe expand upon Shala's influence in the story, because she is more important than
Chrono. I mean, she's like the crux of the entire.
Exactly. Like once you see her, you're like, this woman has This woman has like the power. She has the power, like capital THE, the power.
Did you play the DS version or the enhanced version was that ended up having the extra side plot with the time?
The Dream Devourer.
The Dream Devourer. That's right.
I didn't go through. I did play the DS version. I beat it. So the DS version was the last time I'd replayed the game before this last time.
It had that in it. Did you
didn't
do the side plot?
I didn't go through the bonus content because I didn't like it. It was just like it felt really cheaply made with like a tile editor.
I'm remembering this badly, but I feel like there's an extra boss that's the Dream Devourer, and it's meant to kind of try in a really rough way to connect Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross.
Anything the DS added was
well, it's also got that cutscene. It's also got that cutscene that explicitly shows Kid as a baby being left for Luca to find.
Oh, is that in Chrono Trigger?
Yeah, it's in the DS version. It's in the DS version.
Yeah, I never saw that.
And it also and they make that tie explicitly, like the Dream Devourer is basically Lavos with Shala imprisoned on top of him.
From Chrono Cross.
Exactly, right. Yeah. So it is kind of like the proto form of the Time Devourer in Chrono Cross. That is and they did that specifically to gap that bridge between the two titles.
I'm on Team Shala for this, is in terms of who the entity is, but I do remember
could it be the Mammon Machine
fan
itself?
Theory that it's Earth.
Okay.
The entity itself is the
I
planet.
remember that theory.
Lava is a parasite.
That's like a very Final Fantasy VII take on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like Square Enix has ever shied away from the planet being a living entity.
Yeah, exactly.
There was also. I'm sorry, Finn. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. The fourth wall meta thing of the entity is you, the player, and you are.
I remember hearing that also. I like that explanation.
That's a very
really good
take on it.
It's a very Earthbound take on it.
I really like that explanation.
I'm going with that one.
I had also heard like Gaspar as a possibility, considering that he was thrown to the end of time.
Yo, think about Gaspar. That dude had a fucked up life. Can you imagine just appearing in the end of time and nothing is there?
Oh,
like he had to, like everything that you see in the end of time, like he had to make himself out of.
Yeah, he built a lamp. Like he's very industrious. Like he had nothing.
Was he there before Specchio, or was Specchio there first?
Good question.
He was. I know that's the eternal question. What came first,
you see
Gaspar or Specchio?
You see a cutscene of him getting sent to the end of time, and when he shows up there, he's like, he turns around, he's like, okay.
He's like, now what do I do?
Yeah,
like this really sucks.
So, I feel bad for Gaspar because at least Melchior and Balthazar like ended up in places.
Yeah, exactly.
They weren't just forever alone.
Yeah, but God, one of the saddest scenes in that game is when you shut down the, how do you say it, New?
Yeah. Oh yeah. When he's like, do me one last favor and shut the
shut
the
New
down.
I'm not saying they're not also tragic. I'm just saying at least they weren't tragic and really isolated throughout time.
And and what's crazy is that like when you shut the New off, like Rebecca just got me thinking. Like when you shut the New off and you try to talk to it again, it says this creature is asleep beyond the flow of time, and that for whatever reason that line really hit me hard.
Yeah, it does.
It's
not even him; it's like the remnant of him. Like he's gone. I don't remember which one it is.
You know which line always hits me, even though it's such a throwaway like repeat one. When you go sleep in the machine,
but you're still hungry.
You're still.
How do you pronounce it? Is it Energatron?
Enertron.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question for you guys.
Well, and they really hammer it home too, Finn, with like your stomach growls.
Yeah,
it's like you're still hungry.
For you all, on the topic of story, which character arc do you, the main playable characters, do you resonate with the most? Because every character had like a complete arc.
It's so tough. I said this on the Final Fantasy VI retrospective we did too. This is such an ensemble cast. It really is. Really, Chrono's the least relatable of all of them.
He is because you don't ever
stands around. He's a doll the whole time.
I think actually. Side note: Chrono Trigger might be the only game where I truly enjoy a silent protagonist.
Well,
it works.
Rebecca, literally, he is a doll at one point.
I know that's what I mean. Like he's a doll, but he may as well just be the doll because
they fought long and hard internally about whether to keep Chrono silent. It was Yuji Horii from Dragon Quest that eventually convinced them all to.
I think this is one of those. This is one of those cases in where and honestly, it gives a little more credence to the theory of the player being the entity that the party is referring to. Because Chrono is a vessel for you. Like you are. Right. you know, Chrono is whatever you imagine his personality to be. Right. So I think that lends that theory.
Originally, he was going to talk, and then when they finally decided he wasn't, they had to like redo all the scenes.
I'm glad they did. I'm glad he does it in retrospective.
Yeah.
I think to answer Finn's actual question, I think Luca is probably the closest to me, just because she's, I don't know, she's intrepid and smart, and she's
your hair.
She understands time travel with no concept of time travel existing already.
Yeah, she just builds things. She's like, look, I get time travel. I made this machine that can teleport people. She's just so cool.
It's not like there were books in that world that like talking about time travel. Like she just understands the concept.
She's also, the thing that I like about her that I think was kind of rare in RPGs of that period is Marl isn't really a damsel. She can fend for herself, but she is a damsel at different points in the story. Luca does whatever needs to be done. If she needs to stay behind and work on something to make sure that the job gets done, that's what she does. If she needs to go along, then she does that too. And she also has a cool little, like, no one else in this era has a gun.
Yeah, exactly.
She built a gun. She's so cool. And she also has her little...
The glass,
she's got a little poking her. Plus,
like Chrono Trigger, the sprites are twice the size of like Final Fantasy.
They are, and they're
so good.
They're so well animated.
They're
so well animated.
That much.
Marl's little happy dance.
For me, it's got to be Robo. Robo is my favorite character in the game.
Just like getting rickrolled every 5 seconds.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
his theme is great.
His best mashup. So the best. I hate to disagree with you, John, but the best sprite animation is the Chancellor's surprised face.
Yeah, it's pretty good. With his mouth goes.
His mouth goes like all the way. Yeah, and no, but as far as a character that resonates with me goes, I think it would have to be Robo. And maybe Brandon will understand this, but like, you know, in boot camp, you're taught to think a certain way. You're taught to, you know, you're reprogrammed basically. You're programmed to act a certain way, and and so kind of like, you know, later in life, kind of trying to unprogram yourself, which is essentially what Robo is.
That scene at the beginning, like right at the beginning when you first meet Robo and he meets the 6 other robots that are exactly like him.
Yeah.
Like, you are malfunctioning. That scene is amazing.
It is. And they're all, and you know, and they're all beating up on him. They're all like shoulder tackling him.
Toss him down the chute.
And the
music is so goddamn sad.
When it's like the personification of that scene from The Simpsons when he's like, stop, he's already dead. I was like, God, leave Robo alone. He's also got such an amazing fucking theme. I love Robo's theme.
It's rickrolling.
It is an incredible thing. Before I had ever heard that song, I loved Robo.
Oh yeah. But now
I love the remix too.
The remix mashup.
Well, and when you figure out what his ultimate fate is in Chrono, not to get too far down the Chrono Cross rabbit hole, but when you figure out that he is the Prometheus circuit, like that and that's his ultimate fate, I was like, no.
That scene fucked me up. I cried so hard. Like, we're gonna talk about Chrono Cross later, but of all the things in Chrono Cross that emotionally affected me, it was that moment, and then the moment in Chronopolis, when the music is like dark and dank the whole time, and then suddenly it goes into this kind of dark version of I think Wind Scene or Secret of the Forest or one of the little Chrono Trigger piano riff that we all know.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like it has this dark version of that, and I'm like, oh my god, it's just a bunch of bits of the Chrono Trigger world just smashed up into a bunch of islands.
God.
Like it was all the Chrono Trigger things that hit me.
To answer my own question, for me, it's Frog. And I don't know if it's just because of the traditional like fantasy aspect of it, but his journey of discovering who he was and finding the Masamune and avenging
chopping a mountain in half.
That scene is insane.
That scene is
so good. It's
animated during the PS1 remake.
It zooms out to the overworld and you see like the light going all the way up into the sky.
It's so good. It's so fucking good.
His whole arc, and when you find out his true name. And the whole thing with Maza and Mune.
Yeah, the scene where like Cyrus is on the bridge looking on.
Well, and plus, can we just give a shout out to Luca when she finds out that Glenn is a snack?
Yes.
That's one of my favorite endings of the whole game. But she's like, oh my god, she freaks out over how because when she first meets him, she's like, oh my god, it's a frog. She's like, it's a big talking frog. Ew. And then she's like, holy shit, Glenn is hot. And like that to me, that was one of my favorite moments of the whole game. One of my biggest disappointments is that if you kill Magus, he doesn't turn back to Glenn. I always wondered about that.
Yeah.
I always wondered about that. You know,
I feel like it's just it's like a memory restraint. You know, with like to swap the sprites out.
But how cool would that have been if like what a gameplay, what a switch up that would have been if
if you got to play as Glenn.
If you got to play as human Glenn and not Frog.
I would kill I always recruit Magus.
Always.
Yeah, same.
But if he would change back to Glenn, I would always
I would
always kill Magus.
Trade-off, because I think the trade-off for not taking him is just not nearly as cool as having him as a character.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, speaking of Magus, can we talk a minute about what a shell shock it is to actually realize that Magus is going to join your party? Like,
also that he wasn't the big bad.
That he wasn't the creator of Lavos.
He's such a cool character in the story.
And that he was Janus, too.
And you get to meet childhood Magus.
And that he was almost that one guy from Chrono Cross before they backed out of that.
Gil, he was almost...
I thought that would have been the first time I played Chrono Cross, I was like, oh, hey, it's Magus.
Yeah, that's what I thought, too.
But what happened to Janus, and then trace his path to how why he wants to stop Lavos, and how he actually was not technically a bad guy.
Yeah,
he was just a man with a mission.
Yep.
His sister. He
wanted his sister back.
But man, that scene when you fight him for the first time and you're walking down the hallway and the purple flames are lighting up and you can hear that chanting in the background. It's like, oh my god!
Oh,
like
the sound design in his keep is so cool.
I mean, they build the wind into the song.
Yes,
so, like it hits at the right time because it's built into the song.
It's so good. It's so fucking good. And
honestly, the sound design and the music design in this whole game is.
One of my favorite scenes, and you'll miss this entirely if you don't have Magus in your party when you're fighting Zeal. But when you fight Zeal and Magus is in your party, instead of boss battle 2, you get his battle theme, and he flips his cape back, and he's like, what a pathetic woman. And I was just like, this is so good.
Last playthrough I did a couple days ago, I did have him. I fought Queen Zeal, and I was like, oh shit, that scene was cool.
Another example of good sound design, her little cackle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whatever that little Chrono Trigger laugh is.
Speaking of sound design, the most iconic sound of the whole game is Lavos' scream.
Earlier. Yep. It's right up there with the Metal Gear Solid !
And Kefka's laugh.
Yep, and then it's Lavos' scream. It's insane.
My god.
The first time I heard that, I was like, what the fuck is that?
Sometimes it's built into the soundtrack. Sometimes it's coming from Lavos itself, but it's all over the place.
I think one of the big, I love Chrono Trigger and I love Final Fantasy VI, and I know that they're often paired together as basically the two best.
They
RPGs
came out
of all.
months apart.
Yeah, to the two best RPGs of all time. You probably like either one or the other better, but they're right next to each other. They both do very different things super well. But I think something that was interesting about both of them that was similar is that both Kefka and Lavos are these enemies with no real rational motive. They don't have a tragic backstory.
You can't argue with Lavos.
You can't argue. No, you can't argue with Kefka, and Kefka's still human, so that's maybe a different thing. But Lavos is just a fucking space parasite. It doesn't care what you think.
And technically, Rebecca, they both win. Too obviously you reverse Lavos' victory, but when you started the game, like in 1999, he's already won. Yep. He's already won.
He's just a couple years away.
The scene when they realize what Lavos has done is great too, because they just they turn on the computer by accident. They're like, "What's this button do?" Like they're completely naive to the whole thing, and they're like, "Oh shit." So. We just watched the end of the world. Okay.
Can we talk about the reveal that Lavos is in fact not a giant alien bug, but in fact he's a humanoid? He's basically an alien in a spacesuit. Which really I was like, whoa! I was like, okay, I was not.
Lavos core is just the one tiny little bit on the right.
So I got the impression that the alien humanoid was Lavos, but he was hiding his essence in the core, like he was hiding his personality in the core, and that's the impression I got. But because the humanoid is the one throwing all the shit at you.
Because what are they trying to get across? That when you're fighting Lavos, it doesn't tell you which one is the core.
Yeah.
But so you think you need to fight the humanoid-looking thing in the middle, but that just keeps regenerating itself, and the fight isn't over until you kill the bit on the right.
I got the impression, Brandon, that was basically his brain.
Yeah. So exactly. So you're not really finishing it off until you've.
No,
but he's also an alien space parasite, and literally could be anything.
It's actually a Horcrux. Come on.
So here's my question, right? Like on the subject of Lavos. So there's been a lot of discussion in the Chrono Trigger fan base about whether or not Lavos is responsible for the evolution of the human race, because and maybe one of you can correct me, but
he's responsible for magic.
Well, he's responsible for magic, but I think it was the Japanese it's either the Japanese translation or the English translation that specifically states, all of life was engineered by Lavos in order for him to evolve, to consume it, and like, I can't remember if it was the evolution of life or the advancement of technology that Lavos is responsible for.
I think it was the advancement of technology, or maybe it's a little bit of both, because the entire Kingdom of Zeal was powered by Lavos.
Yeah, I think Finn's got it right, because there's the one ending where, like, if you end it in prehistoric times or something, then the dinosaurs take over and they're in charge. So life already existed and was fine, but whichever species ended up dominating was the one that Lavos effectively gave magic and tech and all that stuff.
And what was so cool about Lavos was when you pierce his outer shell, you find this giant, robotic suit of armor inside.
It's hard to describe.
It really is, but it's got
tubes coming out of it.
He's got tubes coming out of him, and of course, World Revolution is playing, which is one of the most amazing boss fight themes ever. Good. And I love how
it's a boss rush. It's a boss rush.
But you fight them through the Black Omen. Yeah.
That scene that's the way to fight them.
It's got the way to fight them. You listen to World Revolution, it mixes elements of both Lavos' theme and the Chrono Trigger overworld theme into it, which I thought was really cool. But then when you pierce that armor and you find the alien hiding inside of it, it was not like it was a battle unlike anything that I had ever really seen in an RPG up to that point, because it had that weird science fiction music. You could see all the time periods flashing in the background, and Lavos' attacks would change depending upon what time period you were in. Yeah. And the whole thing had just a very, very decisive science fiction element to it that I had never seen up to that point. And it was what a fucking fight that was. Like it's one of my favorite end bosses of all time was Lavos. That whole sequence.
Yeah. The stakes are so high, and it's so dramatic. And I think going back to the thing you mentioned earlier about them seeing the end of the world in the computer, like, I love that moment, and I love what it ends up leading to with that final fight, because I think more than a lot of other media, because there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of RPGs about a bunch of teenagers saving the world in one way or another. But I love that this is a definitive moment for these, basically young adult kids, where they see this thing happening and it's so horrible, and they're like, well, fuck, we're literally the only people who could possibly do anything about this at all. So I guess we kind of got it. Like the stakes suddenly going from here to way the fuck up here.
Well, and what's crazy about that, Rebecca, is that they didn't have to do anything technically. This happens 999 years into the future. Like,
right.
Like almost 1,000 years into the future. They by all rights could have been like, this is.
They care about their future.
Yeah, like
the world's future.
It was really.
The one timeline we haven't really talked about is the prehistoric time, which sets everything in motion, and it's another example of a villain that isn't truly a villain.
Azala.
Like and when you realize that, when it comes down to it, and you realize it's literally a battle for their survival, and if you win, you're dooming their entire species. It's just another example of how the game frames things in a way that other games wouldn't at the time.
Did you know that?
Let it be known, the Reptites fought till the end.
I did not know that Azala was a female until I played the DS version.
Is she?
Yeah.
I did not. Yeah. I still did not.
I always took that as, I don't know why. She coded herself as female to me when I played the game as a kid.
We're also programmed to see monstrous boss creatures as male.
Yeah. And I had no idea until I played the DS version.
Azala, and if something has an A at the end of it, I don't know, Spanish.
Well, what
makes sense.
What I thought was really cool about the prehistoric time period was kind of like the play on I guess the parallels to our world. A giant meteor hits in 65 million BC. wipes out the dinosaurs, ushers in an ice age, which lasts until 1200 BC, which you see in the Kingdom of Zeal on the ground. And I thought that was a really cool way to kind of parallel events in the real world. Only this time the meteor was literally at that point he was a lava spawn, right? Like he wasn't. He was just a lava spawn.
There's a bigger one out there in space somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, and and that is an interesting idea. Is that he's one of many. Like he's just a member of a race.
The Lavos sphere is orbiting space somewhere, and I'm sad we'll never get Chrono Break. Because maybe that would have delved into the origin of everything.
It's really interesting to think he's not like a Kefka or a Sephiroth. He's not this overarching villain. He's one member of a larger of a species, and he just happened to land on this planet.
He's just doing what he's designed to do: terraform a planet and consume it, and then move on.
So I guess
the parallels to the reptites, right? Like they're just trying to survive as a species. He's just trying to survive as a species.
So in that regard, can we even obviously Lavos is the antagonist of the story, but can we regard him as a villain with malice?
I think we don't know because we don't know enough about Lavos. I mean, he very well very well may be sentient and have the capability of saying, "Yeah, I'm going to fuck up this planet," but it also might not. Like I think it's undetermined.
Well, even if it is sentient, it's still just doing what it needs to survive, and to it's just a source of food. The planet,
exactly. It's blades,
right? But doesn't understand that it's dooming. How much does it understand? Is it making a moral decision?
Well, that's why I don't think no one ever really considers Lavos a great villain. It's a great. It's not
problem.
I think it's not that Lavos represents a great villain. I think he just represents the end.
It's a force.
He's a force of nature. Yeah. Exactly. And I think that's what makes him as scary as he is. Not necessarily because he has great character moments, like a Kefka or a Golbez or a Sephiroth.
I mean, other than just killing Chrono.
Yeah,
that's his character.
That's his character moment. His purpose is to represent oblivion. His purpose is to represent the end. Like he is the absolute end. Like he and up until Chrono and his friends, there is no escaping him. Right? Like there's not a soul on earth that can hide from him. And that is what makes Lavos not necessarily a great villain, but a great threat. I think.
Yeah, threat's a great word. Memorable as hell, but
plus his theme is just so fucking good.
Oh my god, yeah.
It's dramatic.
It really is.
Back up slightly, and I want to talk about my favorite moment in the game, which is when you show up in the Kingdom of Zeal for the first time. I love that moment. So in my brain, when I think about this game in Final Fantasy VI, I split them both into two acts, basically. Mm-hmm. Like Final Fantasy VI has an obvious split in half with the opening of Act 2 being Celeste, marooned on that island years after, everything's fucked up. Corridors of Time and the Kingdom of Zeal is like the start of Act 2 of Chrono Trigger. Like it's right at the halfway point, and it represents a huge change in the game. And it's such just that moment every time. Like you show up in this snowy cave, and you're kind of like, great, a desolate, fucked up world again. Yeah. Where am I now? What's going on?
Weird
and you're like, oh god, what has happened this time? And then you go up, and all of a sudden, it just opens up. And Corridors of Time, which is probably the best composed piece of video game music ever created.
I want to do yoga every time I hear it, Rebecca.
Oh my god,
I want to meditate.
So good. And I know the Kingdom of Zeal is also fucked up. Like there's all these horrible implications, especially for the people on the surface.
But it seems so great at first.
Yeah, like the first 20 minutes or even 10 minutes. I don't know how. It probably takes 10 minutes.
Everyone's just like, I can do it.
It was like fucking magic, yeah, and it's just bright and joyful and so cool. And I love that moment. I love that. Like I think of it like a stage play or a symphony concert or something, and that's what you open with in the second half. And I'm just like, wow, we are going places here.
Plus, I mean, I got to give, if we're talking about Zeal, I got to give props to Dalton, who's low key one of the most entertaining characters in the game.
Him and his fucking golems.
He's supposed to be irritating, and he does so well.
His attack his attack is literally a burp. He burps at you, and it stinks.
It reduces your HP by half.
It reduces your He's throwing iron balls at you, and he breaks the fourth. One of my favorite moments in the game is when he breaks the fourth wall. He's flying the epoch.
Cut the music. What the
yeah. This is the wrong music, and then he plays that really, really like crisis, like it's like that crisis music. Yeah. He's like, that's more like it, and I was like, oh, that's so fucking good.
I forgot that happened because when I was just playing through it a few days ago, I was like, I forgot about this scene.
Well, I think there are. I mean, again, we're gonna get to Chrono Cross, but I think it is simultaneously one of the stupidest plot decisions ever, but also one of the most fitting that Dalton is the reason everything got fucked up in the Chrono Trigger universe as of Chrono Cross.
When he went to...
You only hear about it secondhand, but apparently he survived everything.
He got away.
He got a bunch of armies together and just invaded, and we don't know what happened to Chrono and Marl. And I'm like, that is terrible. I hate this plot point, but also it really makes sense.
Well, and the DS, I mean, and Rebecca, the DS version, like, has an explicit scene added where Dalton raises an army in Pore and invades Guardia, and he is the one who is responsible for destroying the capital. And like Dalton was I wish we had seen more of him in Chrono Trigger because he was a great villain. Like you hate him. He was just malicious and
exactly. Because honestly, with how much he's in the game already, his shtick was wearing a little thin by the time you like finally get rid of him. I think because every single time you see him, it's just he throws out some jokes and then he sends out a golem to fight you, and he does it like 3 times, and by the third time I was like, okay.
But the last golem you fight is so great because he's scared of heights.
And then again, it's a joke battle.
Yeah, I love it. Like the golem comes out, and he does the countdown. I mean, the first time I played, I was like, oh shit, it's the golem boss.
Again, like you fight so many golems from Dalton. It sets up your X fight, and they're hard fights.
They're hard as fuck.
The golem twins was, I think, the hardest boss fight in the entire game.
The golem twins were hard for me. The Son of the Sun was really hard to get. I mean, that's more of a puzzle battle.
That's like a optional like game.
But I also thought that the one of the hardest bosses in the game for me was actually the final form of Zeal. The first time I played it, I had a lot of trouble.
You're right. Because that's kind of a gauntlet boss fight. You have to fight like 3 bosses.
You have to fight the Mammon Machine, and then you have to fight Zeal herself, and then you have to fight
the hands
and face. Yeah. But
that was a hard boss fight. You're
right. Real quick before we wrap up here. I want to start with Rebecca, then we'll go to Finn, and then we'll go to Brandon.
I have a hot take I want to throw in, but I don't know if you're going to ask something similar to this.
Well, I was going to talk about favorite endings, but go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay, I have one hot take that I was saving for the end.
Let's drop it.
I don't want a sequel. I did want a sequel. I think the time for a sequel is past.
I've never wanted one.
I would not. In the time when that team that made this game was together, I think they could have made one hell of a fucking sequel.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it is so many years later, I do not want anyone to touch this. Unless it's those same people, and I don't think there's any chance of that happening. Because I can imagine a million ways a sequel could fuck this up. And
it could.
I don't want a sequel.
Well, Chrono Cross, while a good game, was not the sequel I wanted.
No, it's not the sequel anyone wanted. It's a spin-off, effectively.
It is.
I've never played more than a few hours of it.
It's even acknowledged in the game that or somewhere that it's not technically. It doesn't even happen in like the same. It's like an alternate universe.
It's like an alternate reality.
I've played Chrono Trigger 7 or 8 times, and I've played 5 hours of Chrono Cross.
There's a lot of connective tissue between Chrono Cross and Chrono Trigger. Like Lavos is still the villain.
Leans Bell.
Yeah. I mean, and the Prometheus circuit, but in regards to his sequel, like, of course, Finn had mentioned Chrono Break earlier, which was something that had been registered by Square, 15 years ago, Finn? Like, it's been a while. Like, it was a long time. The only thing I want is Chrono Trigger maybe to get like a nice remastering and throw it out on PS4, Xbox One, Switch.
I don't know how you improve the sprite art and
I don't know.
Just crisp it up a little bit. Like,
I don't know.
Put a little HD shine on it, and then kick it out.
Honestly, I don't know.
I just play a port. I play a straight port again, as long as it's not that shitty mobile port Square Enix keeps trying to put on everything.
Which of course, that's with Square Enix, I feel like that's the monkey's paw. We want a port of this. Okay, here you go. And then you get like Final Fantasy VI on mobile.
I mean, I feel like the DS version is as much as you could do.
Just take the DS version and put it on Switch.
I did not play the original versions of this game. I did not play it until it came out for the DS. I I'm really picky about playing games that were before my time. I didn't start playing video games until the GameCube era, so I was a little bit older than most of my peers already. And so anything before GameCube, Game Boy Advance, I tend to bounce off really hard, just because there's like clunky technical things that have since been solved where I'm like, I do not want to do this. Chrono Trigger, I played on the DS, and it's my favorite video game ever. Like
and they didn't change much.
No,
Chrono Trigger is one of those games where if you had to argue in favor of a perfect game,
it's damn close.
Chrono Trigger is probably about as close as you get to
Besides Final Fantasy VI?
Perfect game.
I had one complaint.
Yeah.
And I can't remember it. So
like Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger and Super Mario World and A Link to the Past. If you had to ask me about perfect video games.
Wait, no, Link to the Past is good. I always forget whether it's that or Ocarina of Time. I hate
no,
Link
no.
To the Past.
Yeah, like if you want to talk about perfect
I just
games.
remembered it. I you know what? I did not enjoy the part where you lose all your weapons when Dalton takes you captive.
Oh, the Blackbird.
And then, like that is a very quick part. You get all your equipment back in like less
But it's
than
a
10
pace
minutes.
killer.
It's a little bit of a pace killer.
It's a pace killer because the first time I played that I couldn't figure out the layout and I was like, how the fuck do I get out of here?
It doesn't let you use your techs.
Yeah.
For essentially no reason. Like
wasn't a fan.
Yeah.
Wasn't a fan. But like you said, like it's such a small vertical slice.
It's over in 10. Yeah, you find there's only like 10 rooms you can look through. You get your gear back real quick.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, John. Go ahead. I just wanted to throw that hot take out.
Oh, no. That's great. No, I'm glad you said it. Real quick before we wrap up, I just want to go around the table. We'll start with Rebecca and talk about favorite ending. What's your favorite ending in the game?
Oh, I mean, I don't remember what number it is, but whatever the true final one is, where they float away on the balloons at the Millennial
That's like
Fair.
the canon.
I mean, yeah, like the canon ending. I haven't seen most of the other endings. I've seen a few of them, but so I told you, like, I kind of think of Chrono Trigger sometimes, and like, because I think about the music a lot. The music's really important to me.
Yeah.
We didn't talk a ton about it here, but I think about it in terms of it being a little bit like a symphony, and having the Millennial Fair theme and having the Millennial Fair itself come back at the end and have there being motifs of the Millennial Fair in the final music is just like it's just a perfect full circle for me. It lands really well, and it's like To Far Away Times or something.
To Far Away Times,
yeah, and it just it's good. It's just beautiful and happy, and I like happy endings.
I'll play off that next because my favorite ending is basically the same as the balloon ending, except slightly different. It's the cat ending.
Yes.
This is the one I got on my. So if you like Chrono's mom, after you say goodbye to everyone and everyone's like, bye, we'll see each other again. Like a cat comes running out and then it jumps into the portal and Chrono's mom is like, you forgot to feed the cat, it's running all crazy.
Yeah.
And then it runs into the portal. It's like it's a comic relief ending.
I love that there's joke endings. Like
it's a joke ending.
Why the fuck?
But Brandon
ever again for the rest of his life.
But that's that's my favorite ending too, simply because.
And then they fly away on Epoch.
They fly instead of the balloons. They fly away in the Epoch, but you see, but it flashes through all the time periods, and you see Robo and Atropos sitting on the mountain watching the Epoch fly in the distance, and you see Frog and Magus, Cyrus and Glenn. They're all watching the Epoch fly, and it really reinforces like the friendship and the family that those characters have all built throughout the ages. And that's why and like you've got you got that wonderful music playing, and that's why I love that ending the most. Finn, what about you?
I mean, everyone loves those endings, but out of all the alternative ones, my favorite one is the one where the dinosaur age, where the dinosaur
oh, the reptites.
Well, because it's one of the first storyline endings that really shows just like how different things could have panned out and just the ramifications of a certain choice. Like you decided to go defeat Lavos before Azala. And so because you never defeated her, they win. And so everything changes. It's a huge cascading change. And I thought that was really cool because it was one of the examples of the endings showing you there are different ramifications of fucking with time. And it's like, boom, that's a big one. So I love the happy ending because that's the true ending. I like the joke ones, like the one where Frog goes to profess his love to Queen Lean, and they have half frog, half frog
babies. Yeah,
there's like a developer ending where
the developer ending is great.
Developers are like fucking around in the room.
One.
The developer endings are fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think the dinosaur one is really cool because it just shows like how when you choose to fight Lavos really can have dire consequences. because then you kill Lavos, and so Lavos is never there to prop up humans or give them.
It makes that New Game Plus worth the effort.
It does. It really does. So anyway, that's my choice. That's my call.
Well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here, and we are going to continue on the next episode by moving into Chrono Cross.
And Radical Dreamers.
And Radical Dreamers, which is going to be a super interesting discussion because there are a lot of references and call-outs to Chrono Trigger in those two titles that people are probably not aware of. More so than the game makes explicit to you. And I'm really interested to talk about those, and also kind of my feelings about Chrono Cross as opposed to Chrono Trigger. As considering Chrono Trigger, like if Final Fantasy VI didn't exist, Chrono Trigger would be my favorite game of all time. But anyway, thanks to anybody who is listening to us, and tune in next time for our Chrono Cross discussion. Thanks a lot, everybody. We appreciate it.